So we're on week 3 of a series called Resolving Conflicts God's Way, and you should have some sort of sermon handout, kind of an outline thing that you can take home. And if you didn't get those the first 2 weeks, there's stacks of them out in the lobby somewhere. I don't know where they landed. You'll have to look around. I think they're on that little hutchy kind of a thing under the mirror, but that's the formal name for it. Thank you. I appreciate your laughter. So we're resolving conflict God's way. Basically, it involves 4 G's, and we've done 2 of them. The first one is glorify God. And the first 3 things we're going to do, if we're going to resolve conflicts God's way, don't have anything to do directly with interacting with the person with whom we have a conflict. They're about conditioning ourselves and getting ready for resolving this conflict God's way. So the first, it's 4 G's is how this is laid out to make it easier to remember. And so the first gut check, heart check, is how's your relationship with God regarding this conflict? Are you able to trust God more than anything as you try to work this out? Are you able to serve God above anything as you work this out? And what that really involves is shifting the goal of your eventual interaction about the conflict, shifting the goal from winning to serving God in the conflict and representing Jesus well in the conflict. And here's the great thing. If that's your goal, you can always do that, right? If your goal is to actually resolve the relational conflict, you have placed your ability to have peace and succeed in someone else's hands, which is never a good idea. So your goal is to move into the conflict well and represent Jesus well. So the first G is glorify God. That's the relationship with God. The second relationship to do a heart check on is yourself. That's get the log out of your own eye. And the questions are things like, are you ready to acknowledge your part in the conflict without blaming or minimizing or saying that someone else made you do something? Because here's the key, is that you're responsible for every single thing you do and every word that comes out of your mouth, regardless of what anybody else did. So as soon as you start to think, well, I wouldn't have, if you wouldn't have, well, that's a blame. You need to be ready. Getting the log out is being ready to take responsibility for the words that came out of your mouth and the actions that were part of the problem, regardless of what the provoking incident was. Today is the third relationship. So we got a relationship check with God, relationship check with ourselves, and we got to check our relationship with the other person and the way we're thinking about it before we actually approach somebody. And of course, this is a fairly formalized look. And if you internalize, it's usually most of us have learned how to resolve little conflicts pretty easy. But these are the steps, and the bigger the conflict, the more formal. The more you need to intentionally walk through these steps. So step 3 is gently restore. And the question for this step is, am I ready to deal gently and seek the good of the other party? Am I ready to deal gently and to seek the good of the other party? Notice winning still hasn't come up yet. It's not gonna. That's a spoiler. Am I ready to deal gently and seek the other party's good? Because conflict is inevitable. We've said that every week. But as Christians, we're called to be restorative, not condemning. And that runs through the whole Bible. Leviticus 19:16-17 says this: "You shall not go around as a slanderer among your people." How about that? "You shall not hate your brother in your heart, but you shall reason frankly with your neighbor, lest you incur sin." Old Testament. And then Galatians 6 verse 1, Paul writes to the Christians, he said in Galatia, he says, "Brothers, if anyone is caught in any transgression, you who are spiritual should restore him in a spirit of gentleness, and keep watch on yourself, lest you too be tempted." So as Christians, we're called to be the restorative influence. And in the inevitable conflicts, we are called to be the one that tries to restore the conflict. And the reason is because we're Jesus followers. You and I are, if we're followers of Jesus, we are going to be gentle reconcilers because Jesus is the reconciler who was gentle with us. Romans 5 verse 8 says this, "But God shows his love for us in that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us." How much more gentle can you be than being willing to die for someone who is your enemy? While we were still God's enemies, while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. And so because of that, because Jesus is our Lord and example, Christians take responsibility, says the Scriptures, to seek reconciliation. And this is key, because this comes up in people's lives. It's our responsibility, not as followers of Jesus, to seek reconciliation no matter whose fault it is. No matter whose fault it is. I'll read you a couple of Bible verses. Matthew 18 verse 15 says this, "If your brother sins against you, go and tell him his fault between you and him alone. If he listens to you, you have gained your brother." So if someone sins against you, whose responsibility is it to bring it up? It's yours. I don't even have to know what the situation is. All I have to know is that you want to follow Jesus. If you want to follow Jesus, it's your responsibility to bring it up. Gently, of course, and that's what we're here today about. But if your brother sins against you, it's your job to go tell him. How many times is it possible that someone offends you or hurts your feelings without even knowing it? You know that's true sometimes. And you know that if your feelings are hurt, it stays with you anyways, even if you're not even sure the other person meant to. Or maybe it stays more because they should have known better. I don't know what's going on in your head. But if your brother sins against you, it's your responsibility to go and tell him his fault. Or how about this one? That was Jesus, by the way. And this is also Jesus from Matthew chapter 5, beginning at verse 23. Listen to this. "If you're offering your gift at the altar, and there remember that your brother has something against you, leave your gift before the altar and go. First be reconciled to your brother, and then come back and offer your gift." If you are in church, and remember that you have offended someone else, and remember that you have hurt someone else, and remember that somebody has something against you, Jesus says, leave church, go take care of the relationship. If you're at the altar with your offering, which, you know, for the religious leaders in Jesus' day might have been the high point of the whole thing. If you're at church leaving your offering and you remember that someone has something against you because, you know, you said something or did something or didn't do something or whatever, stop, leave your gift, first go and be reconciled. So if somebody has something against you, whose responsibility is it to initiate the reconciliation? Again, it's yours. It's always yours if you want to be a follower of Jesus. If you have something against somebody else, go and talk to them. If somebody has something against you, go and talk to them. If Jesus did what he did to reconcile us to God, it is our responsibility as followers of Jesus to do the same. It doesn't matter whose fault it is. It's our job to initiate the reconciliation. So the question is, here in this restore gently part of the equation, of the process, am I ready to see the other party as equally loved by God? Am I ready to see the other person, the other party, the person that there's some conflict between us and them? Can I see them as equally loved by God? They're not the enemy. They're not that, I don't know, whatever kind of name you put in your head for people who do things wrong to you. They're not that. They're equally loved by God. Paul writes to the Romans, there's no distinction. All have sinned and fall short of the glory of God and are justified by his grace as a gift through the redemption that is in Jesus Christ. And so the idea of gently restore is that we are ready to see the other person as another human for whom Christ died. They may need your reconciling love and grace. When you, as a follower of Christ, and if you're trying to glorify God and you've got the log out and you're of a mind frame, if you've got yourself in the space where you can gently restore, your willingness to approach that conflict might be the very thing that God is using to bring growth into their spirit, to bring new life into their being. So am I ready to see the other party as equally loved by God? Because, and here's the thing, sooner or later, reconciliation, it really needs to be done face to face. If it's anything serious, and you know this, and if there's one thing that has highlighted this more than anything else, it's social media. Because talking on the phone without being able to see someone's face is bad enough, but how many of you have emailed or texted something kind of sensitive, and you put some thought into it, and you thought you worded it well, and it turns out somebody didn't catch the way you meant it at all? It happens a lot. And if I can give you, well, I'll see if I can give you 2 or 3 things today, but here's one little tidbit, even if you don't remember anything else. If you have anything that's kind of has some emotional weight to it, here's the phrase you need. Let's talk in person about that. Just like put a texting shortcut in or whatever you do on your system. Let's talk in person about that. You're not going to, I'm not talking about figuring out where to go for dinner or whatever, you know that. But if there's something, don't get in an argument. Like if there's 2 back and forths and you haven't solved it, let's talk in person about that. Let's just talk in person, because it's totally different when you're looking into their eyes, right? So sooner or later, reconciliation, it's going to end up needing to be done face to face if it's anything serious. There's a few reasons why, and I'm just going to walk through these super fast. They're in the handout. There are a few cases where face to face might not be the way to start. One is for the sake of love. Like if somebody feels intimidated, maybe if you feel intimidated by them because of their position or their verbal skills or whatever, or maybe you think they might be intimidated by you. Maybe you're glad they're intimidated by you, which it means you have to go back to step 2 again before you can get to step 3, because now you've still got to get the log out of your own eye, right? But for the sake of love, you might have someone else begin the conflict resolution and then move in together. Of course, if there's any sort of danger, like in abuse situations or whatever, you don't want to approach that alone. Or maybe even first, maybe you want someone else to be the third party to begin the process of reconciling that. And there's biblical precedent for that. I don't know if you remember this, Jacob and Esau, they fought. They were fighting when they came out of the womb, and they were fighting ever since. And finally, they were adults, and they hadn't seen each other for a long time. And Jacob's got a bunch of people and stuff, and Esau's got a bunch of people. But remember, Jacob is kind of a homebody. He's a mama's boy. Esau is a hunter and a fighter. And so Jacob is scared. He knows he has to face it because Esau's coming. But he's scared. And so he sends several people ahead with little gifts and stuff just to prime the situation and see how it is with Esau. And that's completely legitimate if there's some sort of danger to do something ahead of talking face to face. And then when I was reading, it said in some cultures, I don't think it's here in America, but in some cultures, starting with an intermediary is actually customary to trying to resolve some differences. So, if you're going to be a follower of Christ, whether or not you caused the initial offense or somebody else caused the initial offense, it's still your responsibility to be the reconciler, to initiate the reconciliation. And I know there's times when in your head you're like, well, they should make the first call. They're the ones who started it. They should call me. I shouldn't have to call them. Well, so what? Jesus shouldn't have to come to earth. Jesus shouldn't have had to die, but he did. And so if you want to be a follower of Jesus, then you're going to do that too, right? You're going to say, I know I shouldn't have to. Fair enough. Maybe you shouldn't. Maybe you shouldn't have to, but so what? That's the answer to that. So what? Jesus did for us, so we do for others. So, we're toward the end of it, if you're looking at the handout. How to gently talk toward reconciliation. This is how you're getting ready, and you're getting ready to have this conversation. So first, ask yourself, am I ready to speak the truth in love? My favorite Bible verse, it may be, well, I don't know, it's one of my favorites. Ephesians 4:15. Speaking the truth in love, we are to grow up in every way into him who is the head, into Christ. That's probably stronger than let's talk about this in person. If you just make one commitment that I'm going to speak the truth in love everywhere, so much goes easy. So much goes right. So ask yourself, am I ready to be honest? Because some of us have trouble being honest. We're the peacemakers. We have trouble. We have trouble saying what we really think and what we really feel. And if you don't say what you think or feel, then the conflict isn't actually resolved because the conflict hasn't even been voiced yet. Some of us are on the opposite end. Some of us have trouble with truth. Some of us have trouble with love because we want to win. Once the conflict starts, there's only one goal, and that is to come out on top. And so we need to ask ourselves, am I ready to speak the truth in love? The next thing is, and this is a quote from Steve Covey, in case you guys like, growth literature. Seek first to understand, then to be understood. Seek first to understand, then to be understood. And James supports this. He says in James 1:19-20, let every person be quick to hear, slow to speak, and slow to become angry, because the anger of man does not produce the righteousness of God. Quick to hear, slow to speak. Quick to listen, slow to speak. So your first argument when you try to reconcile with somebody else should be this. You go first. No, you go first. No, I want to hear and understand what's really going on with you. No, you go first. I care about you a lot, and I want to understand what's going on here. So that's your first argument. You go first. No, you go first. And then I got a little pattern there. This is just active listening. It's you have it everywhere. It says quick to listen. There's a colon there. It says listen, wait, clarify, restate, and repeat. So you listen to somebody, you say back to them. So what you're saying is, so you're saying, and then here's the thing. You're not actually ready to reconcile until you can explain what the other person thinks and why they think it. That's when you're really ready to move forward. When the other person can explain what you are thinking and feeling and why you're thinking and feeling it, and you can explain to the other person's satisfaction what they are thinking and feeling and why they're thinking and feeling that. Then you're ready to move forward. So that's quick to listen. You're listening, you're clarifying, you're saying, help me understand, I want to understand. So you're saying that this hurts your feelings. So you're saying that when I do this, you don't feel valued by me? Because that never entered my head. But that's how you start to learn and grow, right? And then things get to resolve. So quick to listen. The second one is slow to speak. And this is hard I'll tell you, this is hard for me. I grew up in a family, this is something that happened between me and my wife, actually. She grew up I'm going to use what her word might be, a polite family, where they speak and they wait, and then the next person speaks, and they each, one person gets done with what they're saying, and the other person chimes in with what they want. And in my family of origin, when you're sitting around the table and you want to say something, you better have like a hammer and a wedge. And it's always like, no. This is the way and when my wife first had dinner with my family, it was hard because she felt like nobody cared about what she said, which is not true, but it's the family dynamics of how we talk. And so learning to interrupt is a skill I had to develop and continue to work on to this day. And anybody who's talked to me very long has probably heard me say, I'm sorry, I interrupted you, go on. I didn't mean to do that. So slow to speak. The next one is to use I statements, and this is just another practical one. This is me kind of being Dr. Jesus, I guess. That's a joke about Dr. Phil, by the way. but I statements are so good. And there's a model in there. I feel blank when you blank, because blank, as a result, blank. Let's say you're consistently late from when you said you were going to come home. And I'll take on the role of who's ever making dinner every night. So I feel like you don't care about the things we scheduled when you're late, because that feels to me like you don't really care about me, or at least you're not valuing the effort I'm putting in. And so, that would be the next one. I feel upset when you are late because I have put in effort to get dinner ready at a certain time, and as a result, I feel like you don't really value the effort I put in to make a nice dinner, to be ready at a certain time. That's pretty powerful, isn't it? And if you learn to use I statements, you're saying, I feel something. When you're not saying they made you feel, because you don't want to give anybody the power to make you feel anything. But you are saying that you have these feelings in response to what someone else is doing. I feel blank when you blank, because blank, and so that leaves me thinking blank. And you can fill in the blank. We got 3 more and we're done. Use the Bible carefully. The Bible is a guide for you, not a weapon to hit other people with. And I have to tell you, I'm like a Bible martial artist. But if you know anything about martial arts, they never fight unless they absolutely have to. So people bring up Bible passages to me, and all I do is go inside, because I don't want to go there. I don't want to get into Bible battle. So be careful how you use the Bible. If you want to use the Bible to guide your thoughts, your feelings, your actions, that's great. But don't pick up your Bible and hit someone over the head with it. Recognize your own limits. This is for more serious stuff. People are complicated. There's no shame in seeking help. Relationships are complicated. There's no shame in seeking help. Conflicts are complicated. There's no shame in seeking help. And the last thing is this is how you'll know you're ready to restore gently. If you're ready to keep everything bathed in grace. 2 people, 2 parties who have come up with a conflict in their thoughts and feelings or desires about what to do with some sort of resource, time or money or energy, and you're partners. If you're ready to be partners working out together instead of opponents, that's when you know you're ready. That's when you know you've got your relationship with God straight. You're ready to glorify God in this above everything. That's when you know you got the log out of your own eye. You've acknowledged your part, and you may not even know it. So you're ready to acknowledge whatever new part of the conflict comes up in the conversation. You're ready to live as a person who's taking logs out of their eye. And you're ready to restore gently with brothers and sisters for whom Christ died, not enemies who are standing in the way of you getting your needs met. When you're ready to meet as partners, that's when you're ready to actually reconcile. And that's what we're going to talk about next week. Would you pray with me? Father in heaven, you have given us so much great wisdom in reconciliation. Help us to always seek first to glorify you, to get the log out of our own eye. And when we start finally thinking about the relationship and the conflict, to have in mind the mind of Christ, who did not count his equality with you something to be clung to, but became a man and went to the cross for our sake while we were still sinners. So give us the mind, the heart of Christ when conflicts arise, so that we can be as tenderly, gently reconciling and restoring as you have been with us. And we ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.